So my name is Kendall Wyatt. I am the instructional content strategist here at Picmonic. I'm broadcasting today from our Picmonic office in Tempe, Arizona. I'm an RN. I started out actually as a paramedic before that, and I'm in my third year of medical school doing my rotations here in the Phoenix Valley. So one of the things is, what do I do at Picmonic? And I work with our content and obviously instructional content strategist. It's not a completely made up name, but so I work with our actual educational content, and I kind of am in the go-between between you guys, the users, and our actual our team to make sure we have the most up-to-date content, that it's medically accurate, relevant, and work with our team as well as the rest of our scholars to make sure that it's the right stuff you need to learn. And I'm also kind of listening to what you guys say and put it all together. So again, if you have any questions, you can type it in, and after this, you can email us, and if we have something we can address, we will definitely take care of that for you. That's definitely what we're here for. So with that being said, also in the background, I have Steve, who works here in the office and always makes sure everything is kind of kosher and working behind the scenes. We're actually inside of our Picmonic sound booth here in Arizona, in our Picmonic office. So this is actually where all of our audio is actually recorded, and of course I have my mood lights behind me. So we have that as well. So we're going to go ahead and start it without any further ado. So what's Picmonic? Just really quick, and basically we are knowledge mastery using images. So we use characters, and we associate characters with things that you need to memorize so you can memorize it longer. So everything you see today is going to include a lot of images to help you remember and solidify everything. And we give all this for free, but of course we have an entire product that's also back behind it. So this is kind of a snippet of everything we do. So anytime you need to remember anything, so like diseases and things like that, and viruses, maybe like herpes, you'll see this herpes harp displayed in our Picmonic. Everything you need to know, pretty much we cover it, especially if the USMLE Step 1. So that being said, like I said, we cover over 1,000 Picmonics, all the ones you'd need to know for all the, the bugs, the drugs, and everything you need to know in between. So with enough of that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in here. So what are we going to go over today? Today we're going to really just kind of talk about MS2 things. Not so much when to get started like I have written here, but how to put your best foot forward with Picmonic. So how can you use Picmonic to maximize it for your studies to make sure it is going to give you the best outcome for using Picmonic as a resource. I actually used Picmonic for myself for Step 1. That's how I came to work at Picmonic, was I used Picmonic myself for my studies, and I started using it. I loved it, and I started I reached out to the team here, and I tried to help make our product better and give advice, and now of course now I work for Picmonic. But one thing I hear all the time, and we talk to lots of students, one of my main roles here at Picmonic is to listen to all of the students that write in and kind of act as the liaison between our students and our content development team to make sure we have the most accurate content and make sure it's relevant to what you need to learn. So with that being said, one thing I hear all the time is, when should I start studying for Step 1, or when should I, really start working? And really, you should be planning from day one. The answer technically is if you haven't started, then you're really too late, because you need to be studying with the mindset of a long-term goal, not a short-term goal. There's all the different reasons in between. Of course, there's just general fears, of course, What about the information from your first year? What about all that basic physiology information, or the embryology information? Especially if you're using Picmonic when you start for your second year, we're going to go over how to pull those concepts back in so that you have them for the second year, for your to really put your best foot forward. That's really the purpose of today, to really make sure that if you didn't know we have a resource out there, that it's available. And at the end, we're going to give you a whole bunch of new things we're actually just now getting ready to release, and we're getting ready to make them go public. But we're going to actually just go ahead and give them to you today as a download at the end of the webinar today, just for coming, but also give you that to kind of explain how to use them to make sure that they're they're useful for you. So also, making sure you assess yourself. This one's kind of, I always want to say this is a no-brainer, but so often students don't assess themselves early enough. And that's, if you should be testing yourself, doing a question bank to, assess your strengths and weaknesses right away to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So with that being said, there are 3 areas we're going to hit on today, big areas, and that's pathology, pharmacology, and then the big one that everyone knows Picmonic for the best is microbiology. Now, I hear all the time from students that, people use us mainly as a microbiology resource and pharmacology to a point, but what people forget is we actually have hundreds of pathology topics in there. So let's just talk about pathology in general. So no matter what you're really going to be using as a resource to study as the stretch goal or whatnot, and maybe you're taking a pathology course right now, which hopefully you are, we cover all the main diseases, but you need to tie in the pathophysiology basics. So even if and I'm going to use this image again, but here's a nephron. So we have this nephron infographic, and actually I pulled the wrong one in here. This is we've got a little wrong bullet where the thick ascending lipopentally goes here. So you can tie in all of these, because what you can know with Picmonic, maybe you didn't use us for that, but we actually have an actual Picmonic for each part of the nephron. Every different color section, there's actual Picmonic for that to help you remember what actually gets reabsorbed, to help you remember which ions, pass where in each of the parts of the nephron. So you can tie that in. And the whole purpose of everything today is to help you remember that you need to pull all of your knowledge together to get the best, to be able to understand. Because one thing that, especially for step 1, is you really have to understand the topic. You can't just, memorization, raw memorization is not going to do to really help you the best. So let's look at a good example right here. So here's pathology for immunodeficiencies. Now this image, nobody's seen this image because it's brand new. We just created these infographics, and this is one of them for immunodeficiencies. This is one of the images that you'll get for free today, and it's an infographic to help you visually remember, different things. And these, of course, we're going of immunodeficiencies. So almost all of these infographics that we have are actually Picmonics that you can help associate to remember all the nitty-gritty details. But we've made these infographics so that you can remember basic trends of things. So let's say you need to remember all the immunodeficiencies. Well, you know that you need to remember lots of nitty-gritty details, but you have to be able to put the big picture together, and you need to remember like B-cell disorders and all the B-cell disorders together. So you can remember this infographic to have all the B-cells with these basketballs for B-cells. As everyone knows, all the way through our entire Picmonic product, we use consistent characters. So you always see a basketball for a B-cell. And let's say Brutons A-gamma-globulinemia. Brutons A-gamma-globulinemia. I was a little tongue-tied yesterday, but today it seems to be doing much better. But you can remember them right away because you're always going to remember these characters. So what we have with these infographics is now you can remember all of them kind of linearly so that you can remember which one is which and kind of quickly associate the big picture together. Because it's one of the kind of the things, especially we heard from users, is we didn't really have kind of a big picture decision to how it all goes together. Well, the great thing is we're actually going to be giving most of these infographics away absolutely free, so you can share them with your friends, and maybe you used a table before to try to keep which one was which apart, and then aside from your table you use note cards. But now you can use these decision trees or these infographics that we made for you, and then use the Picmonics to remember all the nitty-gritty details. So there's T-cell disorders with a tennis ball. There's B and T-cell disorders, which is, these little tennis ball and this little wife tennis ball and this man basketball here, and then phagocyte disorders. And we always show a macrophage, this macrophage Mac man here. So you can remember those as well right there. So let's look at the top, just really quick, Brutons A-gamma-globulinemia. Let's just look at that one right away. So what you can know right away is, well, actually, there we go. So Brutons A-gamma-globulinemia. So I've got the infographic right here, but what you can see is that I've blown up this character for you so that you can see this wonderful A gamma button gramol right here. So you can this button gramol for Brutons. Button gramol, right? A gamma globulinemia with the basketball, of course. And this is a pretty stressed out looking basketball, but if I was a grandma holding it, it would definitely be just as scary. Sometimes I'm not really sure where our artists get their inspiration for some of these images, and I can just say that we have a lot of fun here in the office. You know, a lot of fun drawing, and of course I can't draw. I can barely draw stick figures, but our artists have a lot of fun, and as a team we have a lot of fun coming up with some of these characters, but I have no idea where they really get true inspiration to draw some of these, especially when I zoom in and I get the ability to get the highest resolution graphics like this one, and I zoom all the way in and I see this grandma, and I was disturbed when I made this image and I didn't make the image, I pulled it in and I saw this grandma, and she's got this weird ear hair. I mean, I don't really know where they get some of this stuff sometimes, but grandma has some really weird ear hair. And as you can see, it's just, I don't know. So the point is, back on topic, is that you can remember these decision trees now because you can always remember all of the B cell disorders together and then tie it back in with the actual Picmonic. So it actually looks like a couple of our artists must be watching our webinar today because they're actually sending me messages today here, so they're listening in. But that's okay. So here's our actual demo version of our Brutons A gamma globulinemia card, and you'll be able to remember all of the finite details. And the most important thing is, you know, even studying for step 1 myself, you can remember the details, but what's really hard is you need to remember those details fast. I mean, you get a minute, 15 seconds every question when it comes down to the actual exam. So being able to spend 2 minutes actually thinking of was it Brutons or was it common variable immunodeficiency? Which one was it? Was it a B cell or was it a T cell? You need to be able to quickly pull those in, like really, really fast. And that's what's really important, and that's why so many people love our product, because we have these really awkward looking grandmas in here to help you remember some of these characters and all these nitty-gritty details. So one thing that right away, and this is a demo card, so it doesn't even have all of the attributes for Brutons, but you can remember right away is all of the globulins, or these goblins here, are all decreased. IgG, IgE, IgM, and IgA. All of them right away are all decreased because they all have these little down arrows. And you know, an interesting point of, we work actually really hard in the back end. We have our wizards work really hard to make sure we follow a lot of consistencies that some people necessarily don't realize, and maybe it's because you realize it more subconsciously. But every time we show a down arrow, it's always red. So anytime you can remember a down arrow, it's always red. And that's how you can think, well, was it an up arrow or a down arrow? But definitely was definitely down arrow, so it's red, and you can also help remember those things. So Bruton's A gamma globulinemia, right away you can think that it's X-linked recessive because you have these little X chocolates right here, right? So X chocolates, that's X-linked recessive. And that's all those tiny little tidbits and details that you can think of right away. So without getting too many into the details of Bruton's, we're not going to go definitely into the, that's just going to bore you to death. And that's not my point, because I really want to hit in, especially when we get to the micro here in just a bit, and pharm. So pathology, here's just an example of all the different ones. So look at how different they are. Look at how all these different stories are. Now, what I can tell you for sure is that when I was studying for step 1, some of the stories, I would write my own little imaginary, I could remember it myself, try to pull it in, myself. But what I remembered to help me remember, so I can tell you right away that this is Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome right away. I can just easily pull that in, and I can pull in most of the names right away. This is Shigella syndrome. Right, I can just pull them right in because these are most of the ones that I used to help me remember these very, very, very fast. And when you think about the questions, especially when you get to step 1, it's going to be that one tiny little nitpicky detail that you're not going to be able to quite remember. So you need to remember some of these really bizarre things. And of course the answer, I teach a lot of nurses. A lot of nurses I teach all the time. And nurses have to really, I don't want to say be told, but they have to have very specific, this is what you need to know, blah, blah, blah. But as a med student, and you know this yourself, right away the answer is you have to know everything. And it's no different, especially when you get to step one and picking all these details out. So I don't want to beat a dead horse per se. So let's look at pharmacology, another course. Pharmacology right away, how many drugs are there in pharmacology? Hundreds, right? You have to know right away. Probably the biggest thing that you can really do is maximize it with the drug endings. Maximize all the drug endings first. So know all the drug endings for all of the major drugs. So ACE inhibitors, know that they end in pril. Beta blockers, know they end in LOL. Dipines, know that those are calcium channel blockers. Know all those right away. That's really, really, really important. Be able to recall those as fast as possible. But don't forget them, because I can tell you you're going to get pimped with questions, especially through your rotations, and you're going to be able to need to recall those right away, and that's really important. So let's talk about pulling in all the mechanisms of action and all these high-yield side effects with it. So here's all the kinds of different drugs and endings, and knowing which one which, like azoles, this antifungals with this azoles, and being able to pull all those in. But what's really important is you're going to have to, especially for step one and in all your studies, with true questions, is you really need to be able to not just do the endings, but you have to pull in the biochemistry portion. You have to be able to pull in the biochem from the original part to tie it all together. And if you didn't memorize those receptors before, you need to have them now. And I've had some students write in, and they've had, trying to learn pharm, but they never really learned biochemistry and all of the pathways and really understanding it. And that's where they've really kind of been at a fault. So make sure as you learn medications and you're going through your pharmacology course that you brush up on some of those pathways. Make sure you know some of the, especially, all the alphas and the betas. Make sure you really know which receptors act on what, which muscarinics work where. Make sure you really understand that, and don't skip over that stuff, because you're going to be really hurting if you don't. And make sure you understand like the dopamine pathway and all those to really get it, so you can pull it in together. So the other part is the physio to pull in. So I told you this image was going to come back, and here it is. So you have to match the pharmacology in with the physio, and here's the nephron again, right? So this is another infographic that we're going to be pulling in for you, is pulling in all of these characters that where the drugs go in this actual image, or in this graphic. So here are all the sections. You can go in Picmonic and you can learn the proximal convoluted tubule, and you can learn about carbonic anhydrase, but you need to remember that that's where acetazolamide works. But what do you also need to know about acetazolamide? What do we use acetazolamide for? Does anybody know? You guys are kind of quiet today, not lots of questions. What do we use acetazolamide for? Nobody knows? Wow, I thought you guys were smart. So acetazolamide is, so Megan says she hasn't had renal yet. Well, in the as what my attending would say is, that's not my problem. You need to know the answer, and you need to know the answer to everything. But one of the things we use for altitude, for high altitudes, right? So acetazolamide will alkalinize the urine. But that's when you learn these, make sure you always understand that. You understand why you're giving it. So you understand the physiology of how it actually how it all goes together, how all this works together to really understand. And Sophia says altitude sickness, and that's right. That is one big reason why we give it. But what else? We also give it for glaucoma. I mean, we don't want to forget about glaucoma, and for sure on there. I mean, we can give it for edema to get rid of fluid as well, but not as much. Yeah, Chelsea said glaucoma. I don't know if Chelsea said that after I said glaucoma, but it is given as well, but also just to alkalinize the urine. So anytime you need to alkalinize the urine, you would need to you can use acetazolamide. So you can remember these and how they go through, but just like if we go down to the thin ascending loop of Henle, so I know that we can give mannitol. So why would we have mannitol? You may know why we give mannitol, and then I'll stop asking mean questions about drugs. Mannitol. Mannitol, manatee. Think about the manatee in Picmonic if you haven't learned it. Oh, Anthony says ICP. That's right. Intracranial pressure or cerebral edema. But we can also give it for intraocular pressure increases as well. So intraocular pressure, but mostly cerebral edema, increased intracranial pressure. That's right, because it's an osmotic diuretic. So what you need to do is you can go in and learn the physiology, and you learn the physiology of all these. And what's really good for you that I mean, every time I say this, a student always kind of says, well, I don't have time to go back and review those things. But as you're learning the drugs, quickly just brush back up on your physiology because it's going to help you times 1,000 when you're actually thinking it through and you can go, oh, yeah, that's right, because we do all that. That's why we give mannitol, because it's an osmotic diuretic and we get rid of free water. And that's definitely how you should think about it. So thick ascending loop of Henle is ethacrynic acid and furosemide. Furosemide, ethacrynic acid. We're going to get right here on ethacrynic acid in a second. Distal convoluted tubule, hydrochlorothiazide. But just really quick, what's a major difference between the DCT, distal convoluted tubule drugs like hydrochlorothiazide, and loop diuretics? What's the major difference? Major difference. It's so high yield, you're going to have to. This is one you can't go without in your exam. You're going to get something maybe possibly like this. Not so much potassium. They definitely both lose potassium. The big one is calcium. So I always think about, I'm not sure where I actually heard this the very first time, but I always thought about loops lose calcium. Loops lose calcium. Well, loops lose everything, but they also lose calcium because thiazide diuretics hold on to calcium. So you can have high calcium levels with thiazide diuretics. That's definitely true. And of course, both of them are sulfa drugs. That's also right. One of you guys. So just the other thing, collecting duct, we know we have other drugs, and if you want to go into, here's where you need to tie all these things together, and I'm telling you this because, the answer is, of course, yes, you need to know everything, but you need to know that amiloride and triamterene actually work with sodium. They're sodium blockers, but spironolactone actually works on aldosterone itself, and they all work because they're all potassium-sparing diuretics. But as a med student, you can't just memorize that they're all potassium-sparing. You really need to understand how it goes in there as well. Sophia asks how about adding Picmonic to her regular course exams. So this actually works. The same thing we're talking about here is using it the same way in your pharmacology course. The thing I'm trying to make sure that we iterate today is if you have your pharmacology, you need to make sure that you understand the physio when you tie it and when you learn it, because it's going to help you solidify it long term so that you really understand all of those concepts and how they go together. That's definitely true. And here's ethacrynic acid that we're talking about, and it's the big thing is memorizing the details, putting it all the little details in with this Earth comet here. So here's ethacrynic acid. Here's our ethacrynic acid Picmonic we made, and here are all some details. But what you can do is pull out the big details. So that is a loop diuretic. You remember the loop hin right here, and it's ototoxic. And that's one of the things. Ototoxicity is you always see some glowing ears. Ototoxicity for sure. So the point is, with saying this, is what you need to do as a student is take your entire course and break up each of the areas that you have for your for each of the areas of the Picmonic. And that's what I'm going to actually talk to you here at the end on some of the new things we're working at here at Picmonic that we're going to be releasing really soon to show you exactly how we've really kind of solved most of the problems where we've talked about adding Picmonics into your course, actually following through an entire course and really getting it and making sure we've got all the different things. And let's just go ahead and look at this with microbiology. And here's exactly kind of what I'm talking about. So if you're studying any type of course and you want to break down the entire course and also prep for your USMLE Step 1 and everything and put it together, here's microbiology. So you need to start with micro, and there's tons of things you need to memorize. Well, we have our infographics now that we have for you. So you're going to be learning, most likely you're probably not going to start with mycology, but I've started with it just to show you show you this at first. Maybe you're going to start with gram positives, which is most like what everyone starts with, but we're going to get to that in just a second. But you're going to learn each one of these, and then you're going to learn each one of the different types. So you're going to start with mycology, and you're going to take each one of these Picmonics, which each one of these Picmonics exist, and you can go in and create your playlist so you can learn each one of these. And definitely one of the things that's important is, and as I just said 100 times, you need to know all these little nitty-gritty details. And what you can do is create a playlist for every single day that you need to learn. So if you're in a course right now, and let's say I have an exam in 2 weeks, you can set up a playlist for either every day or every 2 days. You can go back through, and you take that playlist. You can use it on your mobile device. You can then learn it at home. We just actually released our continuous audio feature, so you can now listen to your entire playlist on your iPhone with it, in kind of like a gem mode per se. But you take all of these Picmonics, you put them in a playlist, and then you can play that entire playlist end to end. Then you listen to that one, then you do it again. And the secret is, with Picmonic, how do I maximize to make sure that I'm actually going to get it? I get this question all the time. How many hours do I need to spend? What is the recipe to succeed? Every student is a little different, but the real answer is anywhere from 3 to 5 times. You need to learn a Picmonic 3 to 5 times until you've really got it. That's what all of the students we've surveyed, all of the students we've talked to, thousands of students, that's the number we've come down to where you really have it and you've got it. And then when it comes down to your board exam, you can just review it really quick and you've got the answer. So just to really quick talk about this, let's just say Cryptococcus right here. It's my favorite character in Picmonic because it's this crippled cock. You can see right here this rooster is just all crippled right away. So let's look at the actual Picmonic. Cryptococcus neoformans. All of the details you need to remember. You can remember all those tiny little details. So you can remember fluconazole. You can remember this flute. You can remember that we give it for meningitis. We can remember that it's a latex agglutination. You can remember soap bubble lesions on the brain because they have soap bubbles here on the head. All these things you can remember right away so you can get it. Here's amphotericin for this amphibian character right here. So with that being said, let's talk about how you could put let's say you're doing microbiology and you want to do the entire course. So what I did, and what I always recommend is, let's say you make a playlist of all the gram-positive bacteria. And here's our gram-positive infographic. And these are all characters, of course, that we have inside of our Picmonic product. So gram-positives, here's all the bacteria you need to know. Here's a decision tree that you would probably have learned if you never used Picmonic, only it would all be text and not fun characters. So instead of branching filaments with these branches, you'd actually just see branching filaments, right? Instead of these just bacilli, you would just remember bacilli, or you'd just remember rods, and you'd remember cocci. Maybe you can actually remember cock eyes. So this looks exactly like any other decision tree, but this is the actual reference to put it all together. So this is where you think of which one was it after you've memorized the Picmonics. So you take gram-positive. Everyone kind of starts with gram-positive, right? Oops, sorry. Everyone starts with gram-positive, and what you can do is you start with gram-positive and you make your playlist for gram-positive. Every single biology course puts you pretty much starts off with gram-positive. You learn gram-positive, then you learn gram-negative, then you go on and you learn fungi and parasitology and whatnot. That's kind of how every single one basically works in every book. So if I took my entire microbiology course and I made my playlist of gram-positive bacteria, so I've got my gram-positives and I listen to that playlist. I listen to it every day or every 2 days until I have it and I pass that test. Well, then I only need to listen to my gram-positive bacteria playlist once a week. That's the real success. Because what happens is you listen to it up until your actual exam, and you've got all the finite details. What kind of test was it? It's latex agglutination test for Cryptococcus neoformans. And I can tell you Cryptococcus neoformans has one of our highest number of attributes in a card. It has 17 facts in there. It's one of the largest ones we have. But I can remember every single tidbit because that's exactly how I learned it. I learned it multiple times, and that's what you need to do too. So every single course, let's say pharmacology. Let's say I'm learning GI pharmacology. I'm doing GI Pharm, and there are 14 GI Pharm cards. I put those GI Pharm cards in a playlist, and I learned those. I try to learn them as many times as I can before my test. Let's say every day, every other day, because once a week I'm learning a playlist from a couple of weeks before. And then when it comes to exam time, I've mastered my my GI test or your gram-positive test. It's exactly the way you need to do it. Because after you have your gram-positive and you have that one whipped, well, gram-positives are very common, all those nitty-gritty details. So not only the characteristics of the bacteria, but also common infectious diseases. So knowing that Streptococcus agalactiae can be in with pregnancy, and knowing those kind of things, knowing about knowing all these tiny little details, strep pyogenes, the viridans, memorizing all these nitty-gritty details are very, very, very important. Knowing about Clostridium and puriferans and gas gangrene, and being able to recall those tidbits very fast is very, very, very important. And you may not think that right now. You think, oh, I kind of got it. I really, kind of, I know it enough to pass my test. But really mastering all the nitty-gritty details are what's going to give you a very high score on Step 1. Or in the long term, it's definitely going to save you tons of hours and stress in the beginning. So here's another gram-negative bacteria. And, I just said all this, and everyone always says the same thing. Kendall, you repeat yourself. You're saying the same thing over and over. And here's something really that's important here. So you listen to the gram-positive playlist that you made for a couple of weeks until your exam. You did good. And then you listen to it once every 2 weeks throughout the rest of your microbiology course. And then you just kind of tucked it away. Well, right before you do your exam, you're going to memorize it again. And what we're actually working on right now, and I was just working with, I just talked to Sharon right before this webinar, our master of our content. He's doing his residency right now, and that's what we're going to start working on finalizing out a lot of our third-year med product. But what I can tell you is, let's say you learned all these bacteria in your second year, and you mastered all these weird characters. You memorized Proteus as Prometheus. You memorized Shigella as this Shigella. But let's actually think about this. What do we know about Shigella right here? Well, maybe you didn't learn it. You don't know all these really crazy details. What is a really important thing about Shigella? And that's one of the things is you need to know about hemolytic uremic syndrome. And that's a really, really high yield point. And when you're getting into all of your later times, you're going to have to remember all these tiny details. And Shigella being very prominent in daycare centers, you're going to be able to hit those things very fast. And you think, yeah, I kind of got that now. Let's look at an example. You're going to need to remember like the 6DS ribosomal subunit for Step 1, and that's important. That's probably going to be the point that's on your exam or daycare. But bloody diarrhea, this red toilet. So let's look at how does this really help me long term? How do I really take all of it and I put it all together so I know it? And that's where, if I did this in microbiology, and then you know that microbiology, then I have pharmacology myself is important, or it's pharmacology by itself is important, but why does Kendall keep repeating himself on tying it all together? And that is, what do we know about Klebsiella, E. coli, and Prometheus, or Proteus mirabilis? Well, what I can tell you is that those three are definitely affected by first-generation cephalosporins. Well, that's pharmacology. Well, that's right. I have to remember those three are first-generation cephalosporins that really get them. Or I'm sorry. So, and then, excuse me. And then I know that I have all of these extra bugs, Neisseria, Haemophilus, Klebsiella, Serratia, that are in second-generation cephalosporin and Enterobacter. But how did I know that? Well, that's because we have those Picmonics. Here's cephalosporin coverages. Here's first-generation cephalosporins and second-generation cephalosporins. And I can tell you that if you did the exact same thing when you got to antibiotics, we have 36 different antibiotic Picmonics that cover all of those. So what you would have done during your pharmacology course when you got to antibiotics is you created your playlist for antibiotics itself. But you already learned your bacteria. And what you can see is almost all of our microbiology cards, most of them have the actual drug that it's most susceptible to, or the drug you're going to treat it with, included in there. And maybe you disregarded it, but you learned it so many times that you're going to be able to just recall it right away. And what you can do when you get to microbiology is you're going to be remember this crazy story here about these chef, because every time we use ceph, we use a chef, because ceph is a cephalosporin. You're going to be able to recall these stories to help you remember which one is which drug goes with which bacteria, which one covers what. And it's, I can't, the one thing that I really can never convey to any student is that I hear so many times from all of these students, I wish I would have started Picmonic earlier. I wish I would have used it before. And I'm telling you right now, let's say you only could use it right now and you're starting late. This is the way to really maximize it. If you started in your pathology, you go through and you create all of the glomerular disorders. Maybe you're doing renal right now. When you do the glomerular disorders for pathology, well, but there's glomerular disorders for, renal drugs. And, you know, maybe you're doing GI disorders. We have tons of GI disorders. Maybe you're doing GI disorders, but there's GI drugs. And you can quickly just go and also create that same playlist by body system and then memorize it. And that's kind of where you're at. Looks like a couple of my picture here got a little crazy over top of my image. So one of the things that's really important as far as a kind of a tidbit, and it's the same thing, is really making sure that you create this pace. And this pace is really creating your playlist of, let's say I do microbiology, here's my gram-positive playlist, and I have my gram-positive playlist up until my exam. Well, then maybe I do gram-negative, and I do gram-negative up until my test, and then I do it once a week. And then I have my mycology, and then I do my fungi, I do those once a day, or every day up until my test. And then I do it once a week. I just quickly review it. It's really not that hard when you chunk it down into tiny little tidbits about that. And what I can tell you, one of the things we're actually working on right now, and I mean as in I was working on it before I started this webinar, and I was working on it yesterday, and I'm going to be working on it tomorrow, is we're working on a new feature called Pathways. And what we're actually doing is we're actually taking everything that I said today that you should do yourself, and we're creating it into this really beautiful little form to where you can go into microbiology and you just start at the beginning and you click a track of gram-positive and you click start, and all the gram-positives are right there for you, and you can go in and start it, and it works right away. So that's definitely something that you can do. Another important point is to really make sure that you assess yourself, and you can assess yourself with doing practice questions. Do I need to buy a QBank right away? No, not really. But you need to make sure that you be realistic in assessing yourself. If you don't know something, mark it for review later, and that way you can come back and really review it. And pace yourself. And when I say pace yourself, you need to create a rhythm. I mean, there's nothing better than a good rhythm in so many ways possible, but you need to just, you know that you have this many Picmonics to do, and you're going to review those. Because what you're going to find is that when it comes down to review at the very end, is that you're actually just quickly reviewing thousands of actual things that you need to know, and they come back to you so fast. And I always say this same example when it's practicing questions is make sure that you practice questions like they're a marathon. So you imagine that you're, a marathon runner. A marathon runner never starts 4 weeks before a marathon to really start practicing. They start months in advance, really training, and that's what you should do with questions, because you need to be able to recall this information very fast so that you can answer a very lengthy question in a minute and 15 seconds. You have to think pretty complex. I mean, it's a lot of thinking to throw about all that crap and then really get into which one's pointing me to the right answer. And then you're going to get down to every single time you're going to say, well, was it gram-positive or gram-negative? Was there a devil in there, or was there an angel? Was that amphotericin with that amphibian, or was it a flute for fluconazole? I don't know. But with Picmonic, and if you memorize the story, you're going to be able to use it right away. Oops, went totally crazy. So that's really important for you. That's really where you're going to get the magic, and that's really where uh, the you're going to get your best fruit for your labor. We'll say. With that being said, I don't have too much more, but if you have any questions, or right now you can type in there and we can go over those. Um, if you have any questions, you can type them in. We'll see if we can hit them. But if we don't get to your question, or you want to write something else, or you have you want to get to it later, you can always write to us. We have our entire staff here that can write back to you, or I can write back to you, or any one of our scholars can as well, like Sharon. Feedback@picmonic.com, and you can just email us, and we'll get back to you pretty quick right away. So with that being said, so we have these new infographics. So the ones that we went over today, it looks like Ashley asks about the infographics. Do we know when they're going to be released? So for coming today, we're actually going to email you the ones that are out. Now we do have a couple of these that we had out as teasers on our website, and you can go to picmonic.com and see them. But we're actually going to email out the links to the infographics that we used today, that you can actually have, and they're for free. You can share them with your friends, and we made these because we realized there are so many people. There are Picmonic lovers, and then there are Picmonic, we'll call them Picmonic non-believers today, and they think it's nonsensical to use so many of these images, and then they someday start using it, and then they realize the real magic of how you're able to memorize so many more things in them and still have time to actually sleep, right? So we've made these infographics not only as a resource for you to put all the big picture together, but it's also so you have a decision tree, and they're also free to distribute, that you can show and use the ones that we have today. So you can share those with your friends. You're going to be getting those in an email that'll come out to your email address that you registered with. And if you don't get it, you can email us at feedback@picmonic.com, and we'll send it out to you. So yeah. Just looking here, see if I missed any questions. Lots of responses in here. So Amanda asks about pharmacology playlists, and she says, so what's an example of some pharmacology playlists that you would use? And so some pharmacology playlists, you start in pharmacology, and you usually you need to most start with all of the nervous system and the receptors, right? So you need to know the nervous system and all the receptors. Make sure you know the basics of which alpha and beta acts on what, and what really happens with if you stimulate a beta receptor, so then you know that it's blocked. And then you actually go in and create a playlist for those. So you have all your nervous system ones, and you create that playlist. And then you're going to have cardiology, and you have all that playlist. And I usually recommend a playlist per body system, because that's exactly how we've organized our pathways that we're pretty much ready to go to release in the upcoming weeks, as soon as it's final tested. So I'm really excited that we're going to be releasing it. We've been working on it for quite a while. So you can go in and kind of follow tracks of, here is the actual track of all this information that you need to know. So, I always get this question all the time. So Omar asks, was there anything that I would have done differently for step one and for med school in my studying? So something that all the time I get asked is, what would I would have done differently? And that is that I would have, a lot of this stuff that I'm preaching, and I would like to think that most people have someone that they could kind of tell them the hints, tips, and tricks. But one of those big things is making sure that you understand the whole big picture. You don't skip anything. Probably one of the biggest things that really hurt me overall, that I learned my lesson for, was I was doing practice questions with a QBank, and I got some stuff like epidemiology that I don't really love, which I don't think anyone truly loves it, or maybe you're a little weird if you do, I'm sorry. Maybe you love it, whatever. But I would skip over it, and I would say I'm going to come back to that later and really master how to really get a good positive predictive value. And I didn't come back to really master it that well, and I got quite a few questions on epidemiology. I fumbled through them, and I ended up doing okay, but the lesson learned is, if you get something that you don't know, you really need to stop right there and you need to make sure you understand it, because as I keep saying over and over is that you really have to understand all of it. There is nothing you can skip, because you will completely get that question wrong. As you know, you've heard from everyone, as you get to your exam questions, your board questions, do not give very good options as a guesser. The questions, you really need to know your material to get it right. Otherwise, you're not going to get that amazing score. So that was definitely something that cost me a couple of points, I'm sure, was skipping over a couple of those epi things. So there aren't any more questions. If you have any questions, reach out to us at feedback@picmonic.com. We're always here for you. If you have any other questions, you'll be getting an email with those infographics that we're so excited to release out to you. And we've worked really hard on them. So if you need anything else, just let us know. Other than that, good luck studying, and as always, have a great night.